Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 72nd episode of the PB Political Podcast. I'm Eshan Pokhrel, and today we're joined with Alabama State Representative and House Minority Leader from District 53, Anthony Daniels. Thank you for being here, Representative Daniels.
No, thank you for having me.
Sir, this is going to be very fun because not only are you a state representative, but you are also running for Alabama's Second Congressional District with a primary election on March 5th. So just a little background before we get into the weeds of everything. The Alabama congressional map was redrawn by the Supreme Court in July, I believe, in the summer of 2023. And with that, a creation of a second minority majority district was created that covers most of the Black Belt as well as parts of the cities of Montgomery and Mobile. So with that being said, we have 12 candidates running for this seat. So a lot of competition, a lot of fun stuff to get to. But right before we get to that, can you just provide some background for the listeners for who you are and why you decided to throw your name into the ring for this seat?
So I'm Anthony Daniels, the Alabama State House Minority Leader, but more importantly, I'm a father and I'm a husband. I'm someone that's been in the community for some time. I was elected to the House of Representatives in 2014, elected Minority Leader in 2017. I would tell you that during my tenure, I've been fortunate to represent House District 53, but also I've been able to have an opportunity to work with some amazing representatives, some from all across the state of Alabama that reside within my caucus, and some individuals that I work with often across the aisle to get things done. And so my background is education. I was an elementary school teacher. I was a third grade teacher at a public magnet school, fourth grade teacher at a Title I school, and fourth and fifth grade teacher on an Indian reservation. And so during my tenure in education, I've been very fortunate to have been able to see education from an educator standpoint, and now seeing it from a standpoint of being a father. And so my position on education has evolved a lot from being a father and as being a father and also a policymaker. But as a policymaker, I've had the opportunity to be on the front lines of really shaping public policy in education, which some of the things that I've been able to do is focus on adding more pre-K classrooms for young people in communities all across the state of Alabama, and in those communities that did not have a whole lot of classrooms for pre-K, had long waiting lists in their pre-K. We understand that every dollar that's invested in early childhood saves you $7 in corrections. And if we know that, we should be trying to make certain that every child that's born in our community, in our state, has the opportunity to go to an early childhood education program, because we know that the brain development from birth to the age of 5 is about 90% of brain development, and pouring into our young people on the front end helps give them a better opportunity when they're in grade school, when they get to kindergarten, and throughout life in general. And so I'm a big proponent of education. I've been on the front lines of economic development and support for small business, and an avid supporter of criminal justice reform, as well as expanding Medicaid in the state of Alabama. But you may, many will know me, commonly known now as the guy that passed the bill to eliminate the income tax on overtime pay that gives hourly workers a 5% pay raise. And so they're taking home more money in their pockets as a result of legislation that I came up with the idea and the legislation that I sponsored. So I'm a doer. And so when you see all the chaos in Washington, D.C., and where things are not getting done, there's folks not able to come to any type of consensus on behalf of our country. And so when I see that, I look at myself being in the super minority. And being in the super minority, if I'm able to pass legislation that's impactful to working class people and families in the state of Alabama. Imagine what I could do with the numbers if there's a Democratic majority or if the numbers are quite close. You'll have a representative that can work and get things done, whether his party is in the majority or not. And I've proven that. And so what I want to be able to do now is bring community to the chaos that exists in Washington, D.C., and take the same attitude, the same strategies, same work ethic to Washington, D.C. to bring things back to Alabama in the Second Congressional District.
Yes, sir. I actually, the first question we were going to talk about the state income tax, but I do have one question just right before we get into the policy. Where did the impetus from being an educator and doing all this work in your community translate? When did that shift happen from where you were like, okay, I could do this while also serving the state legislature? Or were you always interested in taking that step as well, in addition to the education?
So when I was 23, I was elected chairman of the National Education Association student program. And so it was that experience that really sparked my interest in policy. And so I had $58,000 in student loan debt, majoring at a degree in elementary education. And so the first thought I had in the conversation I had with my friends, jokingly, I said, nobody's gonna, who's gonna marry me with this much student loan debt on a $28,000 salary? So I took that issue and I made that issue an issue that people cared about and they talked about. And so I was very fortunate to work with the Senator Ted Kennedy during my tenure as chairman of the NEA. You are working out of the NEA National Education Association's headquarters in Washington, D.C., and so you have a national audience. And so we were able to partner with other organizations and groups to make the college access affordability issue, make that issue a priority for all of us, because it impacts the housing market. If you got all this saddle with all this student loan debt, you're not going to be able to buy a house or a car, right? So the automobile industry is impacted, the economy is impacted. And so we ended up putting in the public service portion of the College Cost Reduction Act, which passed a year and a half into my term. And seeing the impact that legislation has had on the livelihood of all Alabamians and Americans in general had really sparked my interest in policy, because the things that we talk about on a day-to-day basis, or any conversation or issues that we care about, can actually become law, and you can actually address it as a politician. And so that sparked my interest in policy. And what sparked my interest in politics in the state of Alabama is, seeing the policy victories from D.C., and then later on in the classroom, seeing the impact that policy had in the classroom. And so it worked out. It worked out for us, and it was great, a great experience being able to see that happen. And so that's what sparked my interest in politics. And I've never had a politician in my family, or even knew about politics or had an interest in politics growing up.
It's interesting because I feel like typically it's a little bit of the reverse. So you did the work at the NEA and you saw the impact it had directly in the state. I feel like typically it's a little reverse. People get in because they see something not working. So that's very different. Actually, I find it interesting that like the reverse of the typical, you could say typical, the traditional reason people jump in is to fix something. You're doing it to kind of like further something, which is something that I find really interesting. And we're going to go ahead and get into the policy. So obviously, like you mentioned, the biggest thing I've heard from a lot of my employed friends and family is, oh, we don't pay state income tax anymore on overtime. So HB 217 from last year's legislative session exempted overtime pay from state taxes. I guess just quick, I guess this is a lot. This is obviously could go on for like hours, but like if you want to be just concisely just how did writing and passing that bill which is a bipartisan bill by far, no one's gonna not support that at a personal level. How has that furthered your like ability to understand how I can work in a ruby red state like Alabama, and also How have you used that as something that you can definitely bring to the table in DC, like you were mentioning earlier?
So really, it started off as another issue that started off as a conversation between myself and a gentleman named Corey at a nursery in North Alabama, and he talked about you know what citizens need to be able to keep some more of their tax dollars, and so and really having that conversation and thinking about our workforce participation rate. And when you ask about, ask employers, say, oh, I need 1,000 employees. I can't find any employees. And I'm like, we got to do something. But they didn't have necessarily want to give pay raises to those employees or increase the pay. And so that's when I said, well, okay, well, the government side, they're already working 40 hours. People are already working 40 hours. But anything on top of that, you're using an experienced person to fulfill that. I was actually attempting to increase the participation rate, but also from a manufacturing standpoint, reduce the actual create an opportunity for there to be reduce the demand on products and services, right? And so that way it also impact costs. So trying to take care of costs, increase participation rate, while at the same time produce at or ahead of the production schedule for products and services to be able to be more affordable and maintain some of the pre-COVID costs. So that was the intent. And no one could argue it. And so what I did was I started talking about it at every opportunity I got to speak at, whether it was a chamber group, whether it's employees or what have you. I talked to the business community. I talked to the unions. I talked to all different types of people. And they said, well, is there something has to be missing? They start scratching their head. Something has to be missing. Why did no one else has ever thought of this, right? And so I'm like, I'm not sure, but it seems simple enough to me that it's a solution to long-term problems. We're giving people more money in their pockets. And so as we started having discussions about it, I put it out there for folks to poke holes through it, to test it out. And no one could find a problem with it. And so we started talking to media, whether it was media that's considered conservative or media that was considered liberal, any media that would listen. We were having a conversation with them about it. And when we got a bill finally drawn up, it started a lot more conversations in the State House. And from there, it really took off. And we were able to get the bill on the House floor, passed unanimously. The rest is history. And thanks to the leadership, the Alabama's governor, Governor Ivey, she removed the cap after there was an attempt to put the cap on, and they put the cap on $25 million cost-wise, and she removed the cap, sent it back over, said it'd be too difficult to manage, which she put the bill back in its original form. And I was really ecstatic about that. And so were the members of the House of Representatives and a lot of members in the Senate. And so it's just great public policy. But working across the aisle and having those conversations 6 months prior to session, that's what got the ball rolling. And here we are today, hearing from families that have been able to benefit from this legislation.
Absolutely. I've heard a lot of, obviously, personal, just people weren't even aware this was happening. And now that it's been into effect since January 1st, I believe, it's been very beneficial to a lot of people. So it's an absolute policy win for you and for the state legislature, who also has been looking at slowly, I guess, working its way down to eliminating the grocery tax. I don't know if that's the end goal, but absolutely reducing the grocery tax. And I guess my second, another policy question that I guess is more of a personal interest of mine, but with all these tax cuts, which obviously provides more money, but it brings less revenue into the state, obviously. So and I know there's been a lot of conversation around this topic, the statewide lottery and casino. Governor Ivey obviously had a study group in 2020 around the gambling policy, and they found that this might be a little outdated now, but they found in 2020 that a lottery and casino system could raise over $710 million annually. And I know people have raised the potential of that being a quote unquote clean lottery where a lot of that funding goes to education and infrastructure, if not half and half. So, where do you, I guess, side on the lottery casino bill? But also, do you think this is something that we could see implemented or at least brought to the floor and starting to get more conversation rolling in the near future?
So right now, they're currently actually debating this legislation in committee as we speak. There's a public hearing on this legislation, and so for me personally, it's not something that I personally do. Now I've been to a casino where you go to Vegas, you go somewhere, you may go in, do something, but it's not something that's something that's more of a priority to me of actually gambling. But the people of Alabama said that they want to be able to vote on a lottery and gaming, and so as a representative, I'm not representing just me. I'm representing my constituents. So it's not about me, and so I put my personal disagreements to the side and let the people give the people an opportunity to vote. Now we're working out the details on what that should look like to make certain that we get it right and that we learn from other states. And so I'm hopeful that there is something going to be brought to the House floor at some point, maybe on Thursday, to give us an opportunity to vote on it and send it up to the Senate and let them work on it as well.
Yeah, and I think Mississippi is a state that's been floated, at least when I've talked to people in the know and the people that are working on things like this. Mississippi famously implemented their lottery and casino, and they've shot up the education rankings from being below us in the rankings for education and other quality of life metrics, and they started shooting up into the 30s now, to the mid 30s. And yeah, it's just something that I think every state around us, I believe, has a lottery now: Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, and Mississippi. And yeah, it's good to hear that could be coming to the floor soon. Absolutely. I guess this is more of a, this is going to lean in, now we're going to really get into the congressional campaign, but one last state legislature, this kind of ties in. Obviously, your only bill so far that you've introduced to the floor was HB 31, which adds provisions to legalizing abortion on the grounds of rape and incest. Current Alabama law only allows for abortion in the case of a risk to the life of the mother. So how has this bill been received in the legislature level, knowing that nationally abortion referendums have been very successful for the, I guess you could call it pro-choice, pro-abortion, I guess is a bad term, but for that side of the issue has been I don't think they've lost. None of the referendums have seen a ban on abortion nationwide yet. And in Alabama, obviously, we're a much more conservative state than most of the unions. So how has this bill been received by the legislature? And do you feel like this is something that we can find common ground on between conservatives and progressives and just continue that theme of bipartisanship that you've seemed to have been running and utilizing for over a decade now?
Yeah, I think so. I think it gives us an opportunity to be able to do some things for our state that hadn't been done before. I will say that there are people that lean Republican that also had conversations about they really hope that the bill passed. And I think that a lot of the folks that we're trying to retain in our state, the talent that we're trying to retain in our state, this will give them an opportunity to say that Alabama is trying to right the wrong that they did in 2019, right? I did introduce this amendment in 2019 to protect rape and incest, and they were advised to vote it down because they were trying to get to the Supreme Court, which they did get to the Supreme Court, and they had no clue that this was actually passed and become the law of the land. And so I've heard from some folks. I'm hopeful that this piece of legislation ends up getting a hearing and getting an opportunity, giving people across the state of Alabama an opportunity to weigh in on the issue.
Yeah, and all of the challenges to Roe versus Wade obviously culminated in Dobbs, and that's why I bring it up now is just because, like, I guess I'm sure you've seen the results in states like Kansas, states like Ohio, states that aren't typically, if you look at the federal level, solid Republican states. Obviously, Kansas does have a Democratic governor, but if you look at those states and you see, like, and Kentucky as well, you see the diametrically opposed I guess you could say, from like a national political level of Republicans at the federal level, but pro-choice, you could say, at the local level, or at least pro having the ability, which is what to perform an abortion. So I find that interesting. I think that's another definitely a good battle to pick in the sense. I think that's absolutely like the way income tax, obviously a very popular issue. I do think that I don't have any internal polling, obviously, but I would assume that these exceptions would be probably supported by a decent amount of the state population. I think this is an interesting. I'm interested to see how this piece of legislation turns out. But on to Congress now. So obviously, you're running for the 2nd District. 12 candidates in the race. A lot of state representatives, state senators, and some other public figures. You tended to be among the front of the pack in the very limited polling we have. The last poll, I believe, was the public poll was released in December. It has Representative Napoleon Bracey leading, with you trailing in third place, right behind Shomari figures of the Justice Department. So you're in the hunt. Obviously, that poll, 15% for Mr. Bracey, 9% for Mr. Figures, 8% for you, 47% undecided. So polling we're not really looking at, but how has the reception been in the last couple of months, and how are you feeling going into March?
Here's what I would say. If, in fact, I was third place in that poll, I would not be under the attacks that I'm under in this race. Every candidate that gets on the stage tries to take a shot at me. So that tells me that the polling data that they're looking at it's all about either who paid for it or who paid for it for the whatever campaign, right?
Absolutely. This was December, so
yeah. Let me say this. In December, I'm certain that I was leading in this race, but I'll let them publish what they want to publish. But I've never seen anyone get shot at if they were behind, right? Yeah. And there are organizations, special interest group that's spending a lot of money in this district that just spent $750,000 in this congressional district. So if a person's spending $750,000 for a certain candidate in this race, then certainly that candidate they're not doing it just because. I can tell you that, and they're not doing it if they're up front. If a candidate is out front in the race, do you think there's a donation of $750,000? Who's going to make that type of investment?
No, I mean, just to qualify the poll, I don't know. This is December, so early December, I believe. SPLC Action Fund of the New Southern Majority, for anybody that's listening that knows those orgs. I think so. You think the reception's been positive on the ground? I guess polling has been limited. I'm sure you have internals. But you do feel good going into March about your standing, and what I assume will be a race that goes to a runoff.
I feel really good about where we are. Our team is working extremely hard. I also believe that people in Alabama want to elect their person of choice, and in electing their candidate of choice, that means that they don't want outside influencers trying to buy our congressional race.
Absolutely.
They want to make that decision. The people of Alabama want to make that decision. And the people of Alabama will have the last word.
Yeah, and you've been backed by a lot of big organizations around the state and the country as well in this race. So I'm sure you've been getting a boost in the past. Now that the endorsements are really rolling in, the primary days in less than a month, March 5th in Alabama. I'm sure that it's gonna be a race to the finish. One thing I guess we do have to ask, because it's the one thing that really jumps out when you look at a lot of these candidates in this race, as well as yourself. You've represented the North Alabama district in Huntsville for about 10 years. Alabama 2nd is around. I guess the closest point is still about 3 hours away from that district. So you are very qualified on a legislative level. But you do not live in the district as of now, as I understand it. Obviously, candidates for Congress do not need to live, or representatives do not need to live in the district. But what makes you the best candidate?
So let me correct you on something. I do have a home in the district.
Okay.
And I have 20-some acres of air property in the district.
Okay.
No, I don't currently represent the district, but I do represent the state of Alabama as minority leader. And there's no one in this race on either side of the aisle that have delivered more for the Second Congressional District than I have. I voted and introduced legislation in the Alabama House to eliminate the income tax on overtime pay. People in the Second Congressional District benefit from that, right?
Absolutely.
In the entire state. I passed a piece of legislation that impact microbreweries to allow them to sell growlers to go. Every brewery in the state of Alabama benefit from that piece of legislation. I've pushed the government to add more classrooms in pre-K, over 184 classrooms since 2017. People across the state of Alabama benefit from that. I've made certain that from a budget standpoint, we passed budgets to help in higher education, K-12, as well as community college system. Every community college, every K-12 system, every higher education institution in the entire state benefit from that. And so let's think about this. Former Senator Richard Shelby, where did he live? Do we know?
I believe he lives in Birmingham now, at least. Now.
Okay. Yeah, Birmingham or Tuscaloosa. But he delivered for the entire state of Alabama. If, in fact, there's not a requirement for residency inside of the Congressional District 2, but I have roots in Congressional District 2, how many people say they went to elementary, middle school, high school? How many people can say that they left D.C. in 2008 and came back to the state of Alabama to serve? Not many. No one can really say that.
Yeah, and I mean, I just wanted to bring it up just because, like, again, I personally believe the voters will pick the best candidate.
Sometimes we bring things. Yeah, I just don't think, all the folks that I hear about, when the people find out that I live and grew up in this district, they don't care where I sleep.
Fair enough. Yeah. Has it been a topic that's come up at all on the trail? Not from other candidates, but like
not one person has ever asked me this.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that for Democrats, create they create a hole for themselves. I have not heard the Republicans say one word, and many of the Republicans that are running don't live in the district.
Oh yeah,
But I've not heard one Republican. I have not heard one Republican make one mention to that. It's only Democrats that create holes for themselves.
That might be true. I don't know. I'm an independent personally, but I agree. I did want to bring it up just to see if there was any reaction on the ground. I personally do not think it matters. If the voters believe that you're the best candidate, then they will vote for the best candidate. But I did want to approach the topic. I hope you understand. And then, like, just to end it off, if you are elected in March and then in November again, what do you plan on? Do you have anything, how do you plan on approaching this Congress? You've been very bipartisan in the state legislature. Frankly, I mean, even if you didn't want to be, out of necessity, you have to be. But Congress is one of the worst partisan divides in history. And what do you plan on really doing to start remedying or helping to remedy that divide?
Well, so just it's no different. So when I came to the Alabama legislature, it was divided. When I got to the Alabama legislature, it was divided. They had just they went through the 2010 elections, right? And it was run over, it was basically running Democrats over every day, right? On a certain legislative. And so it started out this way. Montgomery started out just like Washington, D.C. for me. But now the temperature in Montgomery is very different. So it didn't just happen that way. You had to build the relationships and start identifying areas of common ground that impact Alabamians. And it's the same thing with me. I'll talk to anyone that'll listen. But I meet them halfway on issues that matter most to our constituents and help them understand what they can't understand. But I will do that without ever compromising principle. And that's the same attitude I'll take to D.C.
Do you have any legislative priorities, like anything set in stone, like anything specific that you want to move from either the state legislature to Congress or just straight to Congress?
Yeah, eliminating the income tax on overtime at the federal level is the priority.
All right. And lastly, if you had to pick 3 committees, what are your ideal committee assignments in the House of Representatives?
Well, that of course, everyone wants to be on appropriations, right? And so I think that given the number of military bases in the district and the emphasis on agriculture, you certainly want to position yourself to be on committees that deal with agriculture. Certainly want to position yourself to be on approach. Being on approach is something that'll help you bring more bacon back home, which is a priority for me. And looking at some of the military emphasis on military, there are other committees that may be more beneficial than others, and so we're just looking at all of that right now.
Yeah, I believe we have a few members on appropriations. Congressman Adderholt and Congresswoman Sewell, I believe, are on appropriations, and then we have, I know Congressman Carl is, I believe, part of the agriculture, or maybe it's more, but he's, of course, they're challenging each other in District 1, so I'm assuming the winner will try to stay on that committee. But yeah, Representative Anthony Daniels, thank you so much. I think this race is frankly one of the most fascinating in the country, at least going into the election season, looking at it from the outside. I wish you the best. I wish all the candidates the best. And thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Well, thank you. I look forward to seeing you, meeting you at some point.
Yes, sir. And for the listeners, go to pppolitical.com. Keep checking out our electoral coverage. We have new articles, primary updates, and everything in between coming out throughout the weeks and months ahead. So thank you for listening. I'm Eshan Pokhrel, and goodbye.